guys, and welcome to my review of chapter 227 of Haikyuu. And there's actually a lot to get into in this chapter. Not much to analyze, I think, but a lot to talk about because this chapter was super interesting and I have a weird feeling that I'm not in the middle of this frame, but we're gonna have to live with that. But yeah, let's start with Tsukishima in the beginning of the chapter running out of fuel. He's one of the first ones to really feel and start not doing as well as the others. I mean, everyone is tired, but Tsukishima is really feeling it, and that is just the punishment for him not being as focused on volleyball as the others from the very get-go. Which is gonna be a huge problem if they're gonna have other long and tiring matches, because we know that Karasuno has because obviously they are the main characters, and to create tension we have a lot of dragged out sets where they just go way past the 25 point. And I mean their last Seijo match and the Shiratorizawa match are just so good examples of that, because many of the sets just went way above what they should have been, and Tsukishima is not a character who can deal with that. His stamina is not at par with the others, and while it's not as bad as it would have been had he been a spiker, it's still bad because he is their centerpiece when it comes to blocking, and no one is on his level when it comes to blocking. So it's gonna be a huge problem, especially if we get another match which is 5 sets, because Tsukishima kind of lucked out. That's a really bad way of putting it, but he got injured a couple of times and had to sit out. So that way he saved his stamina, but if he needs to play 5 full sets, he needs more stamina, and that's basically what we need to take away from that panel, because Tsukishima did apologize for not being a monster like Hinata, but slowly building up his body to be able to last longer, that's something he needs to work on, because just being good technical is just not cutting it anymore. And we've had remarks about Tsukishima's muscles and strength before, because again he's just not been training as much as the others, and he's far from his full potential. Which, I mean, it just means that he has a lot of room to grow, and I definitely think that one of the people who we'll see grow the most is Tsukishima, because he's a first year, he has a lot going for him, just like he's born with height and intuition, and he's smart, but because his physique can't follow that, there's room for him to improve, while people who aren't born with the things that Tsukima's born with, they have to go other ways, be creative with their strength and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll see all the first years grow, but I think Tsukishima is one of them, one of the ones who'll have the most growth, which is exciting since he's my fave. Next person on my list to talk about is Kinoshita, and I'm 100% sure I got it right this time because they said his name a couple of times in this chapter, and I did read it twice now because I read it this morning and then I had to go to work and now I had to do this review, so I had to refresh myself. But Kinoshita is called out by the coach because it's of course a practice match, which means that they have potential to use all their weapons even though they don't quite know how these weapons will fare. And while Yamaguchi is really eager to get out and play, because he always is whenever they need a pinch server, the coach chooses Kinoshita instead because they need to use him, and he's also hiding. He doesn't really want to get out because he's nervous and he doesn't want to be a pinch server or whatever. But Ukai chooses him anyway, and he gets one in, and then he misses the second one, and Ukai basically threatens him that if he should ever try to hide again, he'll punish him. And that's really funny, but I also think that it might foreshadow Kinoshita having a bigger role later, because I think, of course, when the third years leave, eventually, we have 2 open spots for regulars, and Kinoshita will take one, and then it's up to whether we get a genius first year or either Yamaguchi, Kinoshita, or Narisa will take that place. And it's not gonna be Narisa because he's a middle blocker and Tsukishima and Hinata are very good, unless Hinata were to change his position from middle blocker to wing spiker, which I do think will, or I think it might happen at some point, because I think at some point Yamaguchi will become a regular, and at that point he will be in his position as a middle blocker, and then at that point Hinata should be fully developed, or at least developed enough to be able to actually be a wing spiker again, because that's actually what he wants to be. His goal was never to be a middle blocker, he wants to be a spiker because spiking is what is most fun. And he can't, the only time he's on court in the back lines is when he has to serve, and usually Yamaguchi serves for him, so he only plays half a game. So yeah, at some point I do think we'll see Hinata being a wing spiker, and then having Tsukishima and Yamaguchi being the middle blockers. But I'm getting off topic here. My point was that at some point the third years will leave, and we'll have to see either Yamaguchi, Kinoshita, or not Narita. Yeah, one of those two. They'll have to take that place as a regular. And while I love Yamaguchi, Kinoshita has 0 screen time, so I'd love to learn more about him, because he was also one of the people who with with Chikara left that 1 year back. So yeah, he must be passionate enough about volleyball to come back even after having neglected his training for like a month or whatever. So yeah, I'm really interested in knowing more about Narita and Kinoshita. But yeah, let me move on. So we have some gameplay, and what the next interesting point I think is when we have Hinata joining in on the synchronized attack, or so it seems, because he's actually just being a decoy to I think it was Koganewa's attention he diverted away, so that Asahi only had 2 blockers to worry about. And we all know that if there's not 3 blockers, then Asahi's very, very hard to stop. We hear that multiple times. I think it's Nishinoya who often says that if there's not 3 blockers, then Asahi will get through, unless he's like in really bad form or something. But what's interesting about this is that usually Hinata is a decoy, not because he thinks of himself as a decoy, like he's aware of that being his role, but he always jumps knowing or thinking that the ball will come to him. Like, he doesn't know what Kageyama decides to do until after he's set the ball. And at this point in time, it was different, because Hinata knew that Kageyama wasn't gonna set to him, yet he still jumped and acted as a decoy. And this is really good, because before Hinata was used by Kageyama as a decoy, but now Hinata has the ability to think, okay, how can I use this decoy ability I have to the best of my ability? Because if he chooses to do these things himself, he can run to wherever he wants, and he can do exactly what he thinks is what's needed to divert the attention from the blockers. And since he knows Koganewa, it's easier for him to do stuff like that, because he can read him and say, okay, I know that if I do this, Koganewa will follow me, and that'll take some of the blockers off Asahi. So I thought that's really great. And Kageyama does also comment on the fact that, okay, that was a little weird, it seemed like he was thinking a lot more. And that's been a general theme with Hinata for these last 1 or 2 arcs, that he's thinking a whole lot more. I mean, it started already back in the first Seijo match, I think, where Oikawa started saying that, yeah, the little shrimp, he's starting to think. But I think really in the 2 last chapters, Hinata's getting really self-aware, and I think that's amazing. And obviously the last thing to talk about is that in the end of the chapter, Asahi scores the final point, which wins that set, but he scores by going up against 3 blockers, the 3 strongest blockers that decoy has, and he scores the point. Which I think this is the first time Asahi has been up against 3 blockers of decoy and scored a point, which is just so huge for him, because that was the thing that had him completely down in the beginning of the series, that he hadn't scored a single point against the decoy blockers, and we don't even know how many of those times he had 3 blockers against him. Like, he could have had 1 or 2 at some points. And this decoy is an even stronger team than the one that Asahi faced in must have been the preliminaries for the spring tournament in his second year. So I think that's really important for his character, and I remember how much I smiled when I read this the first time. But it's just it's a huge thing for him, and I think it's partly because he's just been getting stronger and more confident, but as Ukai says in the end here, it wasn't only that, it's not only his strength. And I think what he means is that because Asahi scored with a wipeout, and if you don't remember what that is, basically when the ball hits the block but then it goes out of bounds afterwards, so that basically Tatako was the last one to touch the ball and then it went out of bounds, so it's their fault. It's their fault. It's a wipeout. But I think that was intentional because we know that that was actually what the little giant did to score points. He didn't do as Hinata, they actually spike like you're supposed to spike, where the ball hits the court of your opponent's side. But he used wipeouts so that he would hit the blockers and then have it fly off. And I think that's kind of what Asahi did here, because that's a really good way of dealing with blockers when they're too strong for you to just burst through them. Creating a wipeout is just a really it's another way of dealing with blockers. And of course, it's always better to have multiple ways of dealing with blockers. It's important that they don't always have decoys, and they know that they don't always need to spike past the 3 blockers, that they have other options for dealing with this, because they've said multiple times before they'll face people in the spring tournament who are strong blockers as well, and they need multiple weapons to deal with it, because yeah, sure, if Asahi can't spike past 3 strong blockers, then of course they'll just use a lot of their energy on taking down Asahi and taking his stamina down, and by having Hinata help as a decoy, they'll divert attention over to him, and just in general, having the blockers not know exactly how you're gonna deal with them is gonna be a huge problem for them. So yeah, I think that's really great, and yeah, I think that's ultimately what I have to say about this chapter. It was really good, enjoyable, got a lot of good character development and character setup, hopefully. And yeah, if you like anything that I had to say, please leave a thumbs up on the video. Leave in the comments below what you thought of this chapter, and you can subscribe if you want to see more of me. I also do reviews of One Piece, Shokugeki no Soma, Boku no Hero Academia, and I do weekly videos on Haikyuu the anime and One Piece the anime. So if you're into this, you can subscribe, and until next time, bye!